All right, I'll call the Governance and Operations Committee meeting of January 10th to order. We have two delegations presenting to council. At this time, I would like to welcome the representatives and delegates from the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative. I'm not sure who is taking the lead, but the floor is yours.
Okay, I will start and then I will pass it over to Rob. I grew up in Trail and know some of you, so it's lovely to see you all. And my colleague Rob will be the lead on this presentation. For full transparency, I am the co-founder of Scale Collaborative, one of the leads behind the BC Social Procurement Initiative. So I'm joining today because I love Trail and I understand growing up and living in a small town. I think it's important that you know that a lot of thought went into developing the tools needed to support small and medium-sized towns. This is not a big centric type approach trying to fit into a small town. These tools are specifically built for our size communities. And so what excites me the most about social procurement is that it enables a municipality to leverage the dollars it is already spending and increase the values those dollars bring. So you can support solutions on today's most pressing issues like housing and homelessness, mental wellness, and create direct community benefit. So for example, to support, Trail's future athletic goals. The list of value is as big as the problems you're trying to solve. So municipal dollars solving social issues and creating vibrancy, it encourages people to stay and raise their families here. And it's one way for Trail to continue being a magnificent place to grow up. So I will pass it over to Rob.
Thanks so much, Christy. Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen here and just let me know if you can see it.
Yep.
Excellent. So thanks, Chrissy, for the great overview, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things you mentioned. In this short presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about what social procurement is, and also what the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative is and how it helps local governments across BC to start to look at these new best practices. So what's happening? Well, procurement is evolving. Purchasers are beginning to look at their spending in a different way, from green considerations emerging in the 60s to in the last several years, social considerations being added into the process. And what's emerging is that buyers, particularly governments, are starting to look at moving towards a best value approach that's less focused solely on price and quality, and more an opportunity for creating additional social, environmental, and ethical value from their spending that can support the needs of their communities. So what is social procurement? Well, simply put, these are new practices that can leverage that additional social, environmental, and ethical value from an organization's existing spending. And why are more governments starting to look at social procurement? Well, our communities are facing a number of challenges, things like the economic impact of COVID-19, homelessness and addiction issues, and the effects of the climate crisis are all playing out across the province in the shape of floods and wildfires. And governments spend a large amount of public money on buying a variety of things. So when we think about the things we buy, we know that every purchase has an economic, environmental, and social impact. And this means that our procurement can become more than just a financial transaction. When we mobilize our existing purchasing to include social value considerations, it becomes a tool for building healthy and resilient communities. In real terms, social procurement supports a number of key opportunity areas. Things like local economic impacts. This is supporting local businesses, Indigenous and diverse-owned businesses, social enterprises, and other community organizations. It supports community economic development. This has increased local employment, opportunities, training skills, and apprenticeships that can lead to meaningful work and to help keep talent in the community. It helps ensure a living wage, promotes ethical supply chains, and encourages fair trade opportunities. And it supports sustainability considerations, using a social value supply chain that reduces the impact on the environment and our climate. It also encourages working with diverse suppliers, like BIPOC and Indigenous-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and other equity-seeking groups. When we start to think about what's possible with social procurement, we can look at the economic multiplier effect of using local suppliers. As we see from this data from Loco BC, for every $100 spent with a local business, more than half of that is reinvested back into the local community. However, when we spend $100 at a multinational corporation, only $14 of that gets reinvested back into the local economy. We can also look at job creation and construction projects, and research by the Vancouver Island Construction Association tells us that on the average $1 million contract, local suppliers create almost twice as many community employment opportunities compared to larger multinationals. But social procurement is more than just buying and hiring local. Governments know what their communities need and the challenges they face. And the key thing that social procurement does is that it enables governments to include strategic objectives that they have identified as a priority for their communities for consideration within the procurement process. And importantly, it also allows them to effectively measure those outcomes. So how does social procurement actually work? Well, essentially, social procurement in principle is fairly straightforward. It means adding an additional social consideration into the existing purchasing process. This is weighted against traditional criteria like price, quality, and experience. This means by doing so, we're creating not only value for the purchaser and supplier, but also creating additional value that can lead to benefits for our communities. More specifically for government spending, there are two main pathways for social procurement. One is through the social purchasing of goods and services, and this is the purchasing of all the items you currently buy for your operations. And the other is through infrastructure or construction projects. And these larger projects yield many opportunities for social procurement from the design stage through the actual build and then ongoing maintenance and servicing. Some of the key social procurement implementation options for local governments are shown here. We talk about under threshold and direct award purchasing, and that's your discretionary buying, often dictated by policy at a certain monetary level. This is where going out to tender is not required and might include things purchased on corporate credit cards. And when the cost and definition of procurement require you to go out to tender, this is where you can begin to include that additional social value criteria within the bidding process. We already touched on the opportunities in larger projects, but unbundling portions of these types of contracts is another way that local suppliers can be considered in the process. Exploring social value opportunities in potential bidders' supply chains is another key opportunity. And finally, social procurement can be included in government policy, providing a basis for allowing social value outcomes to be defined and considered across a whole organisation's procurement practices. One big question that often comes up around social procurement is it legal, and what about the trade agreements? Well, the answer here is yes, it is legal, but yes, trade agreements do still apply. And the key thing to know here is that you cannot restrict competition, but you can require social value outcomes from all bidders by including social value considerations within the purchasing process. This means that if an outside contractor is bidding on work in your community, if they want to score points for social value, they'll still be required to demonstrate how they'll contribute to your identified community objectives. And trade agreements also have some key exceptions, namely for working with non-profits and other community organisations. And of course, as we discussed in the last slide, financial thresholds that allow for a fair amount of flexibility and discretion in local and social purchasing below these amounts. Another big question we'll often hear is, does this cost more? And despite common misconceptions, there's no evidence that this is the case. In fact, requesting community outcomes from bidders will not increase the overall price, but it will increase overall value. This is because when you consider social procurement, you're also considering the value of the jobs created, community organisations supported, apprenticeships provided to local people, and so forth. And depending on how you consider the procurement opportunity, lowest price does not always need to be the defining factor when extra value is being created and best value is now being considered. So I'm sure this all sounds great, but we know, of course, the biggest question for governments is usually how do we do this in a cost and resource effective way? Well, that's where BCSPI comes in. The British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative is a province-wide member-based collaborative programme supported by the BC government that provides local governments with access to the training, knowledge, resources and support that they need to implement social procurement easily and effectively. We currently have 30 participating member governments throughout the province, with communities ranging in size from medium-sized cities to regional districts to small rural municipalities. Each member community has their own unique challenges, and the additional social value these members are creating from their existing purchasing is going directly towards the issues they've identified as most important to address. BCSPI has worked with over 200 individual staff from member communities and trained over 150 of them in social procurement practices and concepts. And to date, members have realised over $200 million in spending with added social value and have implemented social procurement practices in over 50 pilot projects across the region, all the way from smaller spends to goods and services purchasing to larger construction projects. And BCSPI provides capacity building support for its members through a number of high value benefits. We take a flexible approach in order to match each of our members' needs, and we work with them from the outset to create a social procurement implementation journey that takes into consideration their staff capacity, procurement priorities, and community objectives. Member staff get access to a full range of core training and other training materials, as well as one-to-one coaching support on a project-by-project basis. And this means staff are consistently receiving support from procurement experts to assist them with finding the best approach to adding social value considerations into purchasing scenarios. BCSPI is a shared learning model, with 2 years of resource development and work undertaken by existing members. And from this, we've built a resource library pack with templates, tools, examples, webinars, case studies, and other supporting information. And building on that shared learning, members can take part in the BCSPI community of practice, which brings purchasing staff together from across the province to share successes and challenges from their social procurement journeys. Members also get access to comprehensive impact measurement and supplier engagement resources, and full policy development and implementation support, and training is also included in that. The BCSPI member journey guides a community's progress from understanding the basic concepts to full implementation and impact measurement. As we follow the steps from 1 through 12, we can see our members start with onboarding and work with the team to plan a manageable and achievable social procurement journey that matches their staff and resource capacity. The next stage is to begin staff training, and then in the first circle, we work with members to identify suitable pilot projects to begin testing social procurement concepts. Here, the BCSPI team provides direct coaching support using easy-to-adapt templates and other resources, and as we move through this first circular phase, projects are identified, they go out to tender, lessons are learned, and the process is adjusted as required. And once a sufficient amount of projects have been undertaken, and member staff are comfortable with adding social procurement criteria to different types of purchasing, we can look towards including social procurement in policy. Once the member is in the full implementation phase, in the final circle, this is where social value considerations are going into the majority of purchasing, suppliers in the community are being engaged in building their capacity to respond to and deliver on government purchasing opportunities, and the social value outcomes are being measured and reported on. And we see members staying in this initiative for 2 to 3 years maximum as they work through this process. Again, most importantly, BCSPI recognises governments have limited resources and some members are able to move more quickly through the process, whereas others need to take time and approach that works best for them. The long-term goal is always for a member to take the learning forward into implementation to a point where they no longer require the support of BCSPI and continue to mobilise their spending to create additional community benefits for the foreseeable future. BCSPI is generously supported by the Government of British Columbia. It's a shared learning model set up in structure to be driven by local governments for local governments. The initiative is governed by a steering committee made up of political and senior staff leads from its member communities. The steering committee meets quarterly and decides on the direction and next steps of the initiative. And this includes what training is required, new resources that should be developed, and how social procurement can help to address existing and emerging challenges faced by governments across the province. On behalf of the steering committee, BCSPI's capacity building, training, resource development and project management services are delivered by a team of social procurement, industry engagement and community impact experts. Biosocial Canada and Presentations Plus are leaders in public procurement and supply chain, and they develop the resources and deliver training and one-to-one coaching for BCSPI members. Scale Collaborative provides social impact sector expertise and leads on project management support and coordination, as well as impact measurement framework development and supplier engagement. And the Vancouver Island Construction Association provides all important engagement, education, liaison with the construction sector. BCSPI recognises the importance of supplier engagement and works on both sides of the supplier and the buyer to help members identify and connect with social value suppliers in their communities. And this helps them to recognise the opportunity to do business with government, but also to understand how to respond to and deliver on government contracts and building those all-important relationships between the demand and the supply side. And BCSPI takes a regional approach to impact measurement. We partner with Royal Roads University to develop a region-wide impact measurement framework and accompanying guide to support members in measuring the impact of their social procurement. This regional impact measurement framework is aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And finally, joining BCSPI is easily affordable and impact for your community. We've seen how a member-specific approach makes social procurement manageable and achievable and within reach for even the smallest of communities. In fact, the BCSPI model has been designed with the intention to provide support to smaller government organisations who do not necessarily have the resources in-house to implement social procurement or have decentralised purchasing departments where procurement work falls on the desks of department heads or other staff. And thanks to the support of the BC government, participating in BCSPI is very low cost with a member fee scaled to community size. This means smaller communities can take part and receive all of the high value member benefits we've discussed for a very low fee. So the annual fee is the equivalent of your local government association dues. And on average for a community with a population of around 5,000, this equates to about $700 per year. And BCSPI's collaborative shared learning model allows members to learn from and build on the shared work of its existing members. So thanks so much. We've come to the end of the presentation and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Robert. That was a lot to digest. I'll open the floor to any members of council first, if they have any questions of Robert or of Christy. And you do look familiar, Christy. Any member of council have any questions?
No.
Carol's got her hand up.
Go ahead, Carol.
Okay, other than the $700 annually, when it comes to training, is there additional charge there?
Absolutely no additional charge. And again, thanks to the support of the BC government, we're able to offer that annual membership all inclusive, and it's for as many staff as you would like to include in the initiative.
Okay, Thank you.
Go ahead, Lisa.
So Brian, I'm just wondering, so have you been spearheading and looking into this for the city through your role in purchasing? And I guess aside from this being an FYI, is there a request or an action from council at this time? Or is a recommendation going to come from staff that we should adopt social procurement? I'm just kind of wondering where we're going from here.
Well, I can certainly let you know, Lisa, that this is something that I've definitely looked at and is part of my training, and have been working with the owner and us. So one of the main factors behind this. So from that perspective, we certainly definitely looking into it and have been speaking about it with Chris as well, just to see what the opportunities would be.
Any other questions? If not, I've got some for you, Robert, Rob. Yeah, I found it to be quite detailed, but at the same time, somewhat confusing for someone who's never heard of such an initiative. And maybe I can get a better understanding of it if you can give me an example of, I saw where the social benefits is the main objective here, fair wage. We can deal with priorities such as homelessness or substance abuse, and we want to focus energies on those, and that our RFPs or tenders would reflect those causes, if I'm understanding this properly. So give me an example of, well, let's assume we're putting out a tender for $1.5 million for lighting our ballpark, which is too late for this process. We've already tendered it out. But what could one expect in a tender of $1.5 million? And how does that project garner monies for a particular cause? And do we have to somewhat screen those that are bidding on the job to ensure that their practices are sustainable, that they're low energy, conservationists, blah, 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 blah. It just, on the surface and just reading it without any knowledge, it sounds that the RFP process alone would be extremely complex for a number of reasons. One is to cover our butts when it goes to a tender process and ensure we don't get any challenges from low bidders, because we're not necessarily going to pick the low bidder. And I've been in cases where the city has been challenged on that in the past. So maybe if you could just touch on how do we word an RFP or a tender to accomplish our goal of getting social benefit from that job?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I appreciate that. I'm not a procurement expert, unfortunately, but in the process, what normally happens is, and you saw a couple of examples in there where we insert the social value criteria. So, at the outset, if you were to join BCSPI, one of the first things we'll do is establish the objectives you're trying to achieve with your social procurement. So that would be addressing your local challenges, those things that you identified as in your social planning, your community planning processes, they're important to your community. And I think you mentioned a couple. And then within that language then starts to feed into your RFP, and you would award a certain amount of points for examples or information given, evidence given about how the bidder would meet that criteria. Starting off fairly low bar, the pilot projects that you would select would be up to you, and our team would help you to start to integrate some of that language. And then essentially you would evaluate it as you would evaluate a normal procurement process, only you're now considering an additional criteria, which is the social value criteria. And that gives you the opportunity to ask certain questions. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to award necessarily, to the lowest bidder, the highest bidder, or anyone, but you would evaluate it considering that extra piece.
So would it, this might be a dumb example, but can we create a policy in council, let's say, that we will only deal with local suppliers who pay a living wage? And God knows, I don't know what that living wage is, $15 an hour, 20. Is that something that we would put in a tender, that we will only purchase from you if you're paying your employees a living wage?
you wouldn't necessarily put that you would only buy from folks that are paying living wage, but you can ask them if they do pay a living wage. And then if they're able to provide evidence that they do, they say, yes, we do, and this is how we do it, then you can consider that towards your social procurement scoring. So where you have that social value criteria, if, say, for example, you're awarding 5 points or 10 points for that, that would go towards that. So if you had living wage, local employment, several other things that you were looking for, they could win points against those things.
Okay, and just one final question, and then maybe we may need more time with Brian if he chooses to talk to council about this. But on the surface, again, I'm speaking without knowledge here, that it, and we kind of assume that all the people bidding on these are honorable companies, etc. But on the surface, they're saying, yes, we can comply, we can do this, and it just keeps adding up their costs. So they'll say, yeah, we're doing it, but in actual fact, we're paying for it because their cost of doing business is going to be could be significantly higher, and will bear that additional cost. I don't know if that's true or not, but on the surface, that's what could happen.
It depends on the scenario. In some cases, costs are actually reduced when, contractors coming in are able to, say, use local labor and materials where they might not have otherwise done that. And so we've seen that happen. At the end of the day, price is going to be a major consideration in your procurement process. And you're not going to score social anywhere near as high as you would price. And so at the end of the day, like if the price goes way up, then you're not going to end up awarding to that person. But it just gives you a sense of what you can start to ask within the process.
Okay.
I might just jump in for a moment and just sort of talk a little bit about some of the things like you were sort of talking about, Sandy, about like what value could it bring? Like if I look at things, social procurement first came around with the Olympic Games. That's where they first started doing that. When they were sort of thinking about how do we bring value and keep this sort of, stuff in our community and things like that. So if I look at, for an example, the BC Winter Games coming up, congratulations, so excited. I think that's really cool. But those are the kind of opportunities where you can use that to have, employment opportunities for people that may face barriers to employment. So it might be that, that might be one of your social goals. So then, your big people that are coming in for infrastructure might bid that they're going to hire two people that might have barriers to employment and continue to provide apprenticeship opportunities, something like that. It might be that you want to be able to, if they have this bid, that means that you want this particular work done on this side, this retrofit, and it has to be done by a local company. Right? So it might not be the head contractor, but it might be the subcontractors that all of a sudden are your nonprofits in your region that then get to access those small contracts. So a $25,000 contract to like a social enterprise or a nonprofit is massive when you start to think about it as not being grant related. This is unrestricted revenue, so that allows them to service whether they're working in homelessness, addictions, or whatever that might be. They use those resources and these kind of contracts to be able to bring that unrestricted revenue into their organizations, because grants, which our nonprofits and charities typically rely on, have very strict deliverables around them. So they can only use the money this way. When they're able to be subcontractors, let's say, on a big procurement opportunity, then they get to use those money to support the work they do and those programs in your community, from feeding kids to whatever those programs are. Right. So it can be vastly, it can be really tailored to the community and what your goals are. But if we start to think about, getting people employed that might have barriers, which then allows them to potentially access housing and reduces homelessness, right? It might provide benefit to the parks. You talk about the lighting, that could have been, that might have been able to be factored in. I mean, that's a big contract, but there's things, maybe the sidewalks were worked on because of that. And certain people, parks upgrades could have been done, and nonprofits gain certain places of that work, so there's lots of different areas where that value comes in. So it is just as tailored as your community wants it to be. But that's where we've seen tons of different examples, is them sort of saying, okay, we're spending this money anyway, but we'd like to, you might have seen it a bit in your development contracts. You know, some municipalities have some value in their development. We'll give you this development, you know, the bid on this development, as long as you create this park over here for our community, right? So it's starting to really look at how you leverage those dollars to create those added values into the community.
Thanks, Christy. Go ahead, Robert.
We're looking at this in the transit committee in terms of local hiring. And what we've done actually now is we've reached out to two different contractors, local contractors, one in Trail and one in Rossland. And we're going to be providing them with the costs that BC Transit wants for these shelters. And what we want to do there is to take a look at it. And what we're anticipating is, and this is only preliminary at this time, we're anticipating that the cost of producing those same shelters with the same quality in terms of putting them in is going to be less expensive than the BC Transit shelters. And if that's the case, because we've given the contractors the numbers are public information, by the way. So we give them that information, and we're hoping that in fact we can employ this one company in Rossland and the one company in Trail to produce all of the bus shelters over the next 7 or 8 years, which is, you know, it'll be in the neighborhood between that and the Exchange downtown, in the neighborhood of $700,000 or $800,000.
You know, and for that, those local companies, that kind of money is game changing, right? Like that keeps so much employment and all of that stuff moving forward. Whereas maybe for BC Transit, it's just not as big of money.
Christy, you brought up nonprofits. And I'm just wondering if it's ever become an issue. I know it happened once here in Trail when I was in government in Victoria, where a private sector company, yeah, I can say it because I don't know who does it now, but there was some conflict with respect to doing a particular job for the local newspaper, and that was stuffing flyers into the newspapers. And it was done by a private sector company. And then a nonprofit bid on that job. And of course, the argument from the private sector then comes, and, you know, that they've had to lay off high-paying people because now it's been moved over to people who are not making as much money. So there was a conflict in terms, I mean, at the time, obviously the nonprofit thought they were doing well, and they did well because they employed a bunch of people a group of people that probably wouldn't have had an opportunity for employment. Yet on the private sector side, they used the counter argument that, well, we just laid off 5 people making X dollars an hour, and you've given those same jobs to 5 people making half of what we were paying. So the local impact was actually a reduction of money into the community as opposed to what it was before. I'm just wondering if you've ever run into that.
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure. I would say I'm not sure. And I would actually push back a little bit and say, actually, it's a redistribution of money in a sense, whereas maybe those people that were employed by the nonprofit wouldn't have been employed. And so I can see where that is an interesting thing. I think we're getting to a place in our economy where it's really blending, though, the interconnectedness between our nonprofits and our businesses need our nonprofits and our social enterprise is to be thriving in order for them to be able to succeed. You know, the pandemic's really showed us when we can't have those festivals and we can't have, you know, those theaters, and we can't have daycare going in, you know, it becomes very complex for our restaurants or hotels, our supply chains. And so all of these things are really interconnected. And so it's how do we start to move money, you know, throughout it. So that might have been an exception to
it probably was.
Right. But I can see where that one would stick, and they would, yeah,
it got ugly there for a bit.
I'm
but
sure
I think as a council, I think in theory, personally, I think the concept is a good one. And I think this council and previous councils, we've been somewhat doing it intentionally. We do have local purchase policies where, all things being equal, You'll always, shop locally when we can. And I am sure Brian and his department, where they can. So this is just taking it to one totally different level in terms of, generating dollars or making those dollars go to work and more than just building that infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah,
Thank you.
I know you have another session coming up as well, so I really want to respect everyone's time. We do have some examples on the BC Social Procurement Initiative website, just of, some case studies on there. And there's also some different webinars that are coming up really around those purchasing power and how you can leverage some of those dollars to be able to create that social impact. So we're happy to sort of can share that website right in here, and then also somehow, share with your team when some of those webinars are coming up, if anyone wants to just be able to have an opportunity to sort of check those out and just sort of see.
Okay. So if there are no other questions, and I'm sure Brian will follow up with council or give us some sort of a report in terms of how maybe he would like to proceed or something for council to consider moving forward. But thanks for your presentation, Rob. Thank you, Christy, and welcome back home for a short, well, you're not at home, but hopefully.
I'm trying to get there whenever I can.
Anyways, thank you very much both for your presentation. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you both. Bye,
Thanks so
Chris.
much.
Great day.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right, interesting. We'll now move on to our second delegation, and the topic being the Selkirk College Bridging Rural Homelessness and the Wellbeing Project. And we have Jamie Jones with us and Rob Tanner from Selkirk College. Welcome to both of you. And who's going to start the ball rolling?
I can take the lead on that.
Okay.
So thank you so much. It's great to see some familiar faces. So hello to all of you.
Hi.
And thank you for your time. So yeah, my name is Jamie Jones, and I am a researcher with Selkirk Innovates. And Selkirk Innovates is the newly named Research and Innovation Division at Selkirk College. And you might have known us formerly as the Columbia Basin Rural Development Institute, just to help ground us. So today I have Rob Tanner with me. He is my colleague at Selkirk College and a nursing instructor with the School of Health and Human Services. And what we wanted to review with each of you today is a proposal that we're developing at Selkirk College that is called Bridging Rural Homelessness and Wellbeing, a Sustainable and Collaborative Regional Response. And so this proposal is going to the National Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada's Community and Social Innovation Fund. A lot of words there. But basically it's for $120,000 per year over 3 years for college social innovation fund or innovation projects that are carried out with community organizations and with the community to really help augment great projects on the ground, and local governments are part of this, and partnerships are key with this proposal. This proposal might sound familiar, as we did apply for it last year with a similar project, and we did get the support of the City of Trail at that time. And our feedback that we got in our original proposal was very positive, with just a couple minor suggestions for improvements, and we feel we totally got that. And so what we've done is I will give you just a quick overview of what the proposal is, and then Rob's going to give us a little flavor of what Selkirk College is already doing in partnership with community around homelessness. And then we'll dive a little bit into the ask specifically this time around. So for the project, we are looking at what the need is, and homelessness is on the rise in the region. Trail is no exception to that. And especially with the colliding crises with the housing and overdose and toxic drugs and the pandemic, it creates this complex situation that we really need to have an innovative regional response. And communities and the social service organizations that are supporting them have been doing such a great job in being able to help respond to the evolving conditions. But there's still more that's needed, and there's still silos within the different communities and the social service organizations. And so in November, we brought together some of the social organizations in our region to just kind of talk about this idea to do this proposal again. And what we heard is that, yes, homelessness is still on the rise, and there's potential for Selkirk College and an opportunity for Selkirk College to really help be a regional convener to help us make progress at the regional scale, especially since the population, the target population, really moves between communities. So they might be in Trail one week, Nelson the next, Castlegar the next. So the overall goal of the project is to improve well-being of West Kootenay residents experiencing or at risk of homelessness. And so we have three key objectives. One is to conduct some research to allow organizations and communities such as the City of Trail to be able to make evidence-based decisions on how to prioritize and structure services or programs or policies, what name you. You know, it could be related to the presentation that you just heard of, or that I just got to listen to with the Social Procurement Initiative. You know, listening and learning to what those priorities are through some research. But the next two objectives are the real key ones, in my opinion. They're all great, but those are two. And that is to promote collaboration between the organizations and communities to strengthen relationships relationships and communications. And that allows us to transfer lessons, what's working well, what's not working well, avoid duplication, make best use of limited resources, and to better support the target population that is moving between the various communities. And so two of the key ways that we plan to do this is through a West Kootenay Homelessness Response Advisory Team. So this would be made up of the variety of community partners, and we're approaching quite a number of them. That includes the local governments such as yourself. We're also asking Castlegar and Nelson. And we will likely include the regional districts as well. And to meet quarterly with all the groups to talk about, to share perspectives and evolving priorities, and to work on building those relationships to know who's doing what, and to work from there. And then to have an annual West Kootenay Homelessness Response Summit. And this is, again, an opportunity to learn from both the target populations and all the stakeholders on what's working well, to celebrate successes, to understand opportunities to improve our response. And out of that, we would prioritize action research projects to help with the emerging needs of the time. So we don't know 2 years from now what the most important thing is for the population, or say for the City of Trail's response to supporting the population. So it allows us an opportunity to work together and prioritize some projects. And what we would use as our third objective, and is to really mobilize college resources. So that's faculty and students to help work on those action projects. We have a wealth of expertise within our institution of faculty who could help address specific projects. We have capacity of students that could do student projects around, you know, whatever the priority issue is at the time. And the last key piece about that that's really important is to adapt our nursing street outreach program to be year-round. Presently, and Rob will speak to this a little bit in a moment, but presently, it just happens during the times when the students are in their courses and it's part of their course load. Through this project, we plan to have year-round street nursing, which we piloted in 2020, in the summer of 2020, and it was very successful. So that is a quick summary of kind of the three objectives this project hopes to address. And with that, I will pass it to Rob to just dive a little bit into some of our experiences so far at the college addressing this with the communities.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
Everybody, thanks for allowing us to speak to Mayor and Council today. As Jamie said, my name is Rob Tanner, and I am a nursing instructor with Selkirk College. I primarily work with students in year 3 of the BSN program. That is provide students with a degree in nursing through Selkirk College and the University of Victoria. So the nursing outreach program provides practice learning experiences for BSN students in year 3, in the fall semester, in the winter semester, and then in the spring. But like Jamie said, there are some gaps when the students aren't in class, when they're not out working in practice, where the outreach services that we routinely provide aren't available to folks. So in these practice placements, students have the opportunity to work in partnership with other community support partners to support marginalized, street-involved individuals living with addictions and all the things that go along with that. Some of the things we do, providing wound care, providing harm reduction supplies. In the wintertime, in our backpacks, we have dry socks and warm clothes and that sort of thing, as well as just interacting with folks, providing counseling, seeing where they're at, and seeing what we might be able to do to help support them and the people that they work with. The other side of the practice placement isn't just the doing and the service provided sort of thing, but there's an incredible amount of learning and awareness that happens for our students, many of which have never, experienced or come face to face with these types of barriers and stuff that these individuals that we work with quite often experience. So yes, we're out there providing supports, but we're also gaining a huge amount of learning and knowledge creation just from being able to be with these folks and learn from the things that they've done on it, just to keep going from day to day. Our nursing outreach, our trail office has been running for both, I think this is our 3rd year. Prior to that, we had a nursing outreach program in Nelson for 10 years. And we've just started last summer to provide outreach services in Castlegar. So we're now fully ensconced in all 3 communities. And in that experience, especially for myself, because I work with students in all 3 communities, one of the things that has become pretty apparent is, like Jamie says, sort of the transient nature of these folks. One day we'll see them in Nelson, one day we'll see them in Trail. So there is that kind of cross flow through our communities, but also that there's so much great work being done in each community, but it seems to be being done in silos. And anything that we can do to kind of help minimize that, start bringing people together and start learning from what other folks are doing, as well as recognizing what the various communities are doing really well. I think it would be a really helpful and supportive thing for a lot of the folks that we work with. So yeah, that's basically, in a nutshell, our nursing outreach programs.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Rob.
Rob. And just to add too, is that this is going to be more than just for nursing students. We're looking at bringing in social work students. We're looking at the possibility of bridging business students with maybe some employment opportunities for those, at risk of homelessness or something like it's more than just nursing students. It's using the full capacity. And so our ask for the council and the city is for some in-kind time, and that in-kind time could be, whether it's someone on, elected official and or staff. We're looking at both where interests lie and where it fits best with you. And the in-kind time would be participating in our homelessness response advisory team of the region, which would meet, we're proposing to meet quarterly, and then to participate in the annual summit. And this would allow you an opportunity to share your perspectives and emerging priorities on the issue as specific to you, to strengthen those relationships, help us guide the research, and an opportunity to possibly have an action projects within the community, or maybe a regional one that's important to your community. And the cash request is to leverage funds through MyTax. MyTax is a funding stream that allows us to hire a student for a 420-hour paid internship. And we need a community partner for that, and local governments are eligible. We have a lot of experience with My Tax Partnership. Selkirk College acts as a supervisor, and we provide all the faculty support for that student, partner relationship, project scoping, mentoring, training, you name it, throughout those 420 hours. But what is required for the internship is a community partner, and the $7,500, which helps us leverage that full internship position for the 420 hours of a student internship. And just a little side note on that is we have 54 interns this past year at Selkirk College, worth $500,000. And so it's a great opportunity for us to just keep doing that for applied research with communities. And so we're asking each of the 3 communities, yourself, Casker, and Nelson, for $7,500. And what that would do is it would allow us to fund one student position per summer. And because there's 3 communities, we can do it each summer. So that means you pay for one and you get 3 summers worth of summer outreach is what we're proposing, because they would work in all 3 communities. So it's leveraging 3 years worth of summer outreach from nursing students. And just the last thing there is, just looking at my notes. If for some reason we are not successful with this large granting stream, we are still applying for a separate My Tax partnership, a My Tax application, which this could then fall under as a backup plan to still be able to do this good work and make best use of the resources to address homelessness within the region. So we have a plan, since the large grant is very competitive, although we're very hopeful that we'll receive the grant this year.
Jamie, you refer to, you bring up the word regional quite a bit in your presentation, and the need for regional collaboration, my question is, would it not be a better regional approach? And I'm not questioning the $7,500, and I totally support your initiative and in minimizing risk and trying to help the most vulnerable people in our communities. But you're going to go to Nelson, Castlegar, and Trail. If we're going to take a true regional approach to this, would it not make sense to go to the regional district of Central Kootenay and the regional district of Kootenay Boundary, so that all of the partners, the entire region, both Central and Kootenay Boundary, are a part of the solution? I mean, granted, we're the larger centers. You know, there are homeless people from Fruitvale that end up in Trail, and people from Thrums that end up in Castlegar, and people from Tagum that go to Nelson. So if we truly want to support it on a regional basis and to get regional buy-in, then it would make sense that we all collectively fund it on a regional basis. And we will pay our proportionate share based on the sizes of our community. And I don't want to discourage you that City Council doesn't want to do this because of the 7,500. I think it makes it consistent in terms of what your initiative and what you're trying to break down all of these silos that I agree do exist. But a regional approach should be regionally funded.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that feedback, Sandy, and it's something that I'm very aware of. And as you probably know, with a lot of granting streams too, we have a short window of opportunity. So we're trying to get all our ducks in a row in a short amount of time. And so we're taking the steps necessary. We are actually looking at bringing the RDCK and the RDKB in through a different stream to kind of sit beside this project. So for this scope, for this proposal that we're doing, we're keeping it with the 3 local governments for now. We'll include the regional districts as we get into the work that we're doing, assuming we're funded with all the advisory team and the work. But we are working on a side with a slightly different product with the regional districts that will complement this. So I kind of have a couple different approaches going, and we're trying to just keep taking actions forward. So I recognize that, appreciate it, and very much have that on my radar.
Thank you, Jamie. Any other councillors want to comment? Go ahead, Colleen. You're on mute. Colleen, you're on mute. You're on mute. You're on.
There we go.
There you go.
I couldn't get my mouse over there, Sandy. Hi, Jamie. It's so great to see you here tonight. Thank you for this presentation. Can you tell me how many outreach nurses we have in this area at this time? How many participants are going through the course right now at Selkirk College? I guess that would be a question for Rob.
Yeah, thank you for that. So right now we're in semester 6, and the students, their practice experience is Nursing 351, and Nursing 351 has a community focus. But right now there are 4 students, I don't want to say assigned, but working in Trail providing outreach services, 2 students in Castlegar and another 4 in Nelson. The way Nursing 351 is structured, it only allows for basically 1 day a week of practice. So the reason we have 4 students in both Trail and Nelson is so we can still provide 2 days a week of outreach services and provide students with that learning that goes along with it. So.
Okay, so also to provide the funding for the student, where we get the summer student for 3 years.
I believe so.
That's how we're hoping it'll work.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that gives us a full-time outreach nurse all year round, I guess, right? Is that what you're trying to do with that summer student?
Yeah, we're basically trying to augment and fill in the gaps when the students aren't available during regular school, regular school years. Or
Oh, okay, okay. So, yeah, I had another question there. Oh, I see. Okay, so is Trail the first city that you've presented to?
Yes, we're presenting to Castlegar tonight, a little bit later today, and it's
Okay.
on the agenda for Nelson tomorrow night. So I'll be there tomorrow night.
Okay, so what happens if one of these communities doesn't want to participate? Are they fully involved at this time?
Well, that's a good question. We're really good at working with what we've got. And so we have great leadership and I have lots of support so that if for some reason that should happen, 1 should say no and 2 say yes, we will work with that and figure out how to make it work.
Okay. Yeah. Is that where the funding from the My Tax funding would come in to help if that would happen? Or is
so what that would mean is it would be 2 internships instead of 3.
Okay.
Would be because you would have to have, we need $7,500 per internship. So then that would be us looking at what would be another option. And maybe that's, looking somewhere else or doing that with 2 or like there's options.
Mm-hmm.
We're really flexible and can evolve and adapt to meet the best needs we can with the resources that we have.
Well, I just wanted to say I've had an opportunity to meet some of the outreach nurses down at CDS. They were working down there with Sheila Adcock, and it was so nice to speak to them because they were so positive about the work that they were doing on the street and helping people. And, I think that it's a great opportunity because I don't know if you know, but in the city of Trail, we're trying to put a very positive spin on the homeless situation and the pandemic, along with the opioid crisis within the homeless. And they were doing such a good job of being positive about it and, spreading the good word about, what's happening on the street and who's helping who. And it would be really sad to not have those people out there being, available for the homeless population. You know what I mean? So I really hope that this goes through for you. And thank you for doing this work. I think it's really important right now.
And even thank you for that. Even the students will because we work from semester to semester. So, and the students kind of rotate through the practice experience. More often than not, when their time is done and the next group is taking over, they do feel that like they'd like to keep doing the work or they're really going to miss it. But the other thing is, when we come to winter break or when we come to to summer break and stuff like that, the folks that are working, they really feel that, in some ways they're abandoning that population, and that because they're gone, then a lot of the work that they do won't be able to be done, and what's going to happen and that sort of thing. And myself too. I mean, I do have the benefit of getting to work with these folks on an ongoing basis, but even myself, when we have to pull back for even those short periods of time, you definitely feel it, that when you get back into the community, you start looking for the faces and the people that you were worried about, or that kind of stuff. And when you do see them, it's like huge relief. And sometimes we don't see them again, and it's tough. Yeah.
I just want to add too, we did do through the funded project that allowed the students to work through the summer in 2020. They did some research and they collected information, and those experiencing homelessness also emphasized that the street nurse outreach is very helpful to them. And so there's been data already starting to be collected showing the need for this, and we're doing some more in Nelson with the population right now, and so we're starting to see the value of this. And so that's why we're really we're listening and seeing a need and hoping to help fill that need through this project.
Yeah, I think it's a great project. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much for your
Colleen.
time.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments from any members of council? If not, Jamie and Rob, thank you very much, and thank you for the contribution that you're making in helping communities deal with what has become a major issue, not just in our region, but probably nationally, if not internationally, with respect to homelessness and the opioid crisis. So it's not going to be the ultimate solution, but it's a step in the right direction in terms of helping out those that find themselves in these difficult situations. So thanks again for your contributions, and council will be addressing this. It won't be at today's meeting, but it'll probably be on the next agenda, I would suspect.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Chair Santori, if I could just add that we do have it scheduled as a grant application later in today's meeting.
Well, there you go.
We'll be able to send a confirmation back one way or the other to Selkirk College following.
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you
Michelle.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, moving right along, we have the Regional District of Kootenay Boundaries request for building bylaw exemption, and I'll let Michelle do an overview of what the ask is and take it from there.
Thank you, Chair Santori. The Regional District of Kootenay Boundary has reached out to the city requesting council's agreement to exempt 2 regional district properties, the McKelvey Creek landfill and the Columbia Pollution Control Center properties from the City of Trails building bylaw. The reason for this is that changes were put into place in the Environmental Management Act and the Contaminated Sites Regulation back in February of 2021, which now require that a site disclosure statement, which you might recognize formerly it was called the site profile, be submitted with a building permit application for certain commercial and industrial sites if there's going to be soil disturbance occurring as part of the building permit. So this is a change prior to these regulatory changes coming into place. Building permits were not a trigger for site profiles to be submitted. And as the regional district looked at the changes that have come into place and considered the large projects that are going to be going on very shortly at both the McKelvey Creek landfill and the Columbia Pollution Control Center, it's understood that regional district staff had some outreach with the land remediation branch of the Ministry of Environment to talk about the particular implications of these site disclosure statements and how it would impact on these projects, mainly in terms of timelines, because with any site disclosure statement that is filed, if there are certain commercial or industrial uses known, it would trigger site investigation, and then a building permit can't be issued by the local government until a release is granted or an exemption is granted by the Ministry of Environment. It's understood that the land remediation branch suggested that the regional district for these projects waive the requirement for building permitting so that site disclosure requirement is not triggered. Given that these properties fall within the City of Trails municipal boundaries, the regional district has had to reach out to us to request that an amendment be made to the building bylaw to exempt these two properties. Speaking to the changes that were enacted by the Ministry of Environment, it's understood that the intent of it was to capture any properties at building permitting, at subdivision, at rezoning time, where there was going to be a change in use, so that if there was site investigation required and potential remediation required, it would be captured. With respect to the two applications that will be upcoming at the regional district level, both at the Columbia Pollution Control Center and at the McKelvey Creek landfill, there's no intended change in land use. However, the Ministry of Environment don't have a very fulsome, I'll say, approach to granting exemptions. So unless council agrees to exempt these properties from the building bylaw, site disclosure statements would have to go to accompany the building permit applications. It would trigger site investigation. And it would result in some delays in terms of permitting, even though there's no change in land use intended. So with that, it is being recommended that council agree to exempt the two regional district properties from the building permit requirements. One consideration for council, though, is whether or not to request to the regional district to make the city whole, so to speak, with respect to the loss in building permit revenue that will be experienced through this exemption. As an example, and it's contained in your reporting, the building permit alone for the Columbia Pollution Control Center would be estimated at $300,000 for the permit fee. So this is a very significant loss in revenue to the city. On an annual basis, we budget building permit revenues at $40,000 annually. So comparably, a $300,000 permit revenue loss is considerable to us. I did reach out to the regional district's chief administrative officer. At the time of preparing the report, I hadn't heard back to determine if there could be an alternate funding mechanism put in place. I did send some information out to all of council with the regional district's response late Friday, and after the agendas had been published, whereby the regional district indicates that they hadn't intended to provide any payment in lieu to the city, given that there isn't services being provided. So it's the recommendation for council's consideration is that you do agree to amend the City of Trail building bylaw to exempt the two properties, the McKelvey Creek landfill and the Columbia Pollution Control Center, from the building permit requirements. I think then if council does agree with that, you may want to consider passing a separate motion, so not making it conditional, around the loss in permit revenue, if you feel that it would be a worthwhile venture for the city to be made whole in that regard.
Robert?
Well, to give you the background on it, we're not doing a building permit at the regional district. And if you read it carefully, we're looking at over $300,000 a month in delay. And even for this short time now, it's already amounted to almost $200,000 it's absolutely clear. We've had the engineers look at it. We're in a process now. We will be hiring a project manager today, no, so tomorrow on this project. We're looking at almost $70 million a project. Now, if we delay even 4 months, that delay will cost us $1.2 million. And that's what the estimate is right now for delaying this particular project, about 4 months by the time you go through this process. Since we pay 70% of it, you would take 70% of 1.2 million. If you take 70% of 1 million, it will cost us $700,000 to recoup $300,000 in a building permit. If it goes longer than that, because we're looking at 3.6 million a year. Now, it's got nothing to do with the regional district, and it's got nothing to do with the city. It's the ineptness of a system which can't grant an exemption when they know that the use of this particular property has not changed. The use of the property hasn't changed. We've talked to them. I've talked to them. We've brought it through committee. They say, look, we understand, and you guys should be granting exemption as the regional district, and we're going to do that. So here in the city of Trail, if we don't grant this, I mean, first of all, we're looking at delaying the project a minimum, I think, of 4 months, or the minimum, you take $1 million, and we're going to be $700,000 in the hole because we're paying that. The other thing is that we're looking at, almost $70 million of construction going on in the city of Trail for the contractors and everything else in the city. So I'm chair of the committee again, and I also sit on the solid waste committee. I was a vice chair last year. I haven't been elected again, but again, that's another thing to delay these projects, particularly in the McKelvey Creek, when everybody is looking to have this organic diversion operational in September or late August of 2022. It would be a disaster, and for those people who are running again, it would be even more of a disaster, considering the support we've got in the community for this, for the McKelvey Creek organic diversion. So I would make the motion exactly what Michelle has stated, except ending it on building permit requirements and forego the conditions of the $300,000. So if somebody seconds it, I'd be happy to that.
Do we have a seconder? Lisa, thank you. Just a question, Michelle. The $300,000 loss in permit fees, it's not $300,000 that we had projected as revenue. So there's no, I mean, the service is not being provided. It's not something that we've booked in as future revenue in any way, shape, or form, have we?
No, that's correct. So the city on an annual basis, we budget for $40,000 in building permit revenue.
Right.
That can vary considerably depending on large projects such as this. So if there are large projects going on at Tech, if there's large projects going on at the Kootenay Boundary Regional Hospital, we'll see a significant influx in revenue that year, but we hold our budget static. Where I was making reference to the building permit fee for the Columbia Pollution Control Center project, that is estimated at $300,000 in accordance with Ms. McDougall's reporting and the staff reporting that went to the regional district. So that represents, I believe, 0.5% or so of the project cost for the upgrade there. So in my correspondence through to the regional district, typically we'd see with cost centers, you want a true cost of what a project is. So I had suggested that $300,000 in permit fees is a true and valid cost of that project. And so if council was agreeable with providing the exemption from the building permitting requirement, as we believe you should do based on the project cost escalation, perhaps the regional district could either grant us some monies back in lieu or perhaps reduce the fees that we pay in our requisitions. But that was not met with the approval of the regional district's staff. Okay. Whether or not there would be political appetite at the regional district would remain to be seen if council were to request that.
Okay, no, I understand your logic behind that, Michelle. I just want to make sure that the rest of council understands that this is not creating a $300,000 revenue shortfall in any way, shape, or form to the city. So it's not a loss. It's just that we're not getting it, where under maybe other circumstances, we would have gotten this windfall on this big project. Right? So if there are no other questions, the motion, so we're not even going to, right, Robert, your motion includes, we're not going to discuss finding a way to replenish the 300 grand.
Just end it right there, yeah.
Okay, and you agree with that as well, Lisa?
Yep.
Okay, if there are no further questions, all in favor of the exemption? Opposed? Carried. And I think I should add, if people didn't see it, with respect to the building part, construction, the BC building code requirements still have to be met in terms of the construction. So just
Yes.
so that people aren't thinking they're going to get away with a shabby building. Okay, so
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say, thank council very much, because I'm just been pushing staff here now constantly to get moving on this thing, because, I can't believe, and Sandy, you probably know, because you were in government like that, but to try to deal with these particular agencies, it's just been a nightmare, just an absolute nightmare.
nothing's changed in 19 years.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. Thank you very much, council.
And next on the agenda, grants and aid. Where are we here? Let me find it.
7,500, move approval.
Second.
Sorry, who was the seconder?
Colleen?
Colleen.
I think Lisa seconded it.
No, I did.
Oh, couldn't hear.
But
Yeah.
I don't care if Lisa wants to second it. I don't,
I didn't even see.
as long as it goes through, that's all I'm worried about.
Okay, so we do have a mover and a seconder. Do we have discussions, questions? Carol?
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Still, I
No.
probably will go through with supporting this. But I have some concerns. Some of the things that they're talking about doing, we're already seeing happening with other organizations. I mean, we've had Mother Stop the Harm make presentations. We know where Redone is going. When the weather's been nicer, they've been bringing in a portable safe injection site. So they're going to be working towards seeing a permanent one. And over a year and a half ago, when Colleen and I visited the safe injection site in Nelson, a lot of things that they're talking about, we're already seeing in Nelson. Two things that she mentioned was counseling, and that's available in Nelson at the safe injection site. And the other one was provide harm reduction supplies, and that would be available at any injection site as well. I think what we need to move forward with in the future is we need to have somebody that's going to be involved, maybe a counselor, have a portfolio in all of these organizations and see where we're seeing so many repeats of issues and where money is going, and we're probably wasting money in some areas, and try to pull these organizations more closely together to work in parallel with one another or as one major group. So I just want to get that on the table, because I think that's something that we need to look at in the immediate future. And I have no objections to the money at this time.
Carol, I think if I understood it, oh, sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
No, I just want to say that Councillor Dobie, these agencies are all working together, and there's natural overlap because you're dealing with the same patient population that are going between communities. And as far as some of the issues that you said, like the counseling and the safe supplies, those are actually being given out and provided at CDS and Trail. And what this is doing is it's building capacity, because we don't have street nurses all the time. You simply just do not have the amount of workers that you need to manage the population. So this is capacity building. Redundancy happens in this kind of work with our vulnerable people. They need supports from a whole bunch of different levels. So, I don't disagree with you, but I don't think that this is a waste in any way, shape, or form. We just need to build more capacity to help an issue that is basically getting worse. It's not getting better.
No, it's not. And I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I just think, do we really know what kinds of things are being duplicated and where maybe one team can take the lead on it instead of two teams trying to do the same thing, or two groups?
Carol, I
So-
think that was part of their presentation, though, if I heard it correct. I think they recognize that there are some duplication and that agencies are working in silos. And I think
Mhm.
part of the research that they want to do is to be able to find out what everybody else is doing. There may be opportunity for shared services whereby they can save money in some areas and focus more money somewhere else. So I think they've acknowledged that there may be duplication, and that there are silos that are existing that they want to break and be more of a regional unified approach to it. So I think in their presentation, they're addressing or agreeing with what you're saying. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's what
I guess we'll just have to wait and see how everything falls out.
Robert, go ahead.
What I wouldn't like to see is if we give them 7,500 and Nelson gives them 7,500, they take that 15,000 and spread it over the three areas. If we give them 75 and Nelson gives them 75, then Nelson and Trail should be getting the majority of the service. That's the only thing I would be concerned about. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Okay, we have a motion to support the 7,500. I can't remember who the movers. Robert moved it, Colleen seconded. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried unanimously. And I don't think there's, am I missing something here?
I'll move for adjournment.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you. Talk to you guys at 6.